Hi, I'm Emma. Welcome to Hidden Finance. If you're earning more than ever but still feel like you're standing still, you're not alone. Here, we uncover the quiet systems shaping your money, income traps, rising costs, lifestyle inflation, and the hidden psychology that keeps even high earners feeling stuck. No hype, no shortcuts, just clear thinking and practical strategies that actually move the needle. If you're ready to stop reacting to money and start directing it, this is where we begin. Somewhere in a quiet apartment on the edge of a busy city, two alarms ring every weekday morning at exactly 6:15. One belongs to the achiever, the other to the reliable one. They are not poor, not even close. The achiever works in marketing, bringing home about $62,000 a year. The reliable one works in IT, earning $71,000. Together, their income reaches $133,000. On paper, that number sounds like a victory. It places them comfortably within the top quarter of households in the country. And yet, their mornings do not feel victorious. Coffee is brewed quickly, emails are checked before breakfast. One of them scrolls through bank notifications while tying shoelaces. The balance is not alarming, but it is never comfortable. There are always bills waiting somewhere in the background. Mortgage, insurance, car payment, groceries, utilities. Every month feels like running on a treadmill set slightly too fast. Not collapsing, but never truly catching up either. Friends often assume they must be doing well. After all, this is the life that was promised. Two educated professionals, two stable careers, a respectable home in somewhere in a quiet apartment on the edge of a busy city. Two alarms ring every weekday morning at exactly 6:15. One belongs to the achiever, the other to the reliable one. They are not poor, not even close. The achiever works in marketing, bringing home about $62,000 a year. The reliable one works in IT, earning $71,000. Together, their income reaches $133,000. On paper, that number sounds like a victory. It places them comfortably within the top quarter of households in the country. And yet, their mornings do not feel victorious. Coffee is brewed quickly, emails are checked before breakfast. One of them scrolls through bank notifications while tying shoelaces. The balance is not alarming, but it is never comfortable. There are always bills waiting somewhere in the background. Mortgage, insurance, car payment, groceries, utilities. Every month feels like running on a treadmill set slightly too fast. Not collapsing, but never truly catching up either. Friends often assume they must be doing well. After all, this is the life that was promised. Two educated professionals, two stable careers, a respectable home in a good neighborhood. Everything society quietly suggests should equal security. And yet, something feels strangely fragile. Last month, the car made a grinding noise on the highway. The mechanic's estimate? $1,800. The number wasn't catastrophic, but it wasn't comfortable either. The reliable one stared at the repair receipt while the credit card machine beeped. A silent calculation unfolded in the mind. Next month, we'll just adjust things. This is how modern financial anxiety often looks. Not dramatic collapse, just a constant negotiation with the future. What makes the story unsettling is that nothing here is reckless. There are no yachts, no luxury watches, no impulsive vacations to exotic islands. Only the ordinary expenses of participating in what society calls a normal life. Housing, childcare for some families, healthcare, transportation, education. The invisible membership fees of the middle class. And here lies the quiet contradiction that few people talk about. A household earning over six figures can still feel like it is balancing on a thin financial wire. Why? To understand this strange tension, it helps to step backward through time. Imagine a similar household, but in 1970. Back then, something curious was different. About 43% of women participated in the workforce, meaning many households relied on a single primary income. And that single income often covered the essentials. Housing typically consumed around 25% of income. Public schools were funded well enough that neighborhood differences mattered less. Childcare was rarely a major expense because someone was usually home. The numbers weren't glamorous, but they allowed something precious: margin, space to breathe. More importantly, there was something else hidden quietly in the background: a backup plan. If the main earner lost a job or became ill, the other adults could step into the workforce. The second income wasn't a necessity, it was an emergency parachute. Now, fast forward to the present. Today, more than 60% of married couples with children have two working parents. What once served as the safety net has quietly become the default. The parachute has already been deployed. At first glance, this should have created enormous financial security. Two incomes, twice the earning power, twice the stability. But something unexpected happened along the way. Expenses slowly expanded. Housing prices surged. Healthcare costs exploded. Childcare became one of the largest household expenses. In many cases, the entire second income disappeared into the cost of simply maintaining the same lifestyle. The treadmill sped up, and suddenly, millions of households found themselves running harder than ever without moving any further ahead. Which raises a quiet but unsettling question. If two incomes were supposed to make life safer, why do so many families feel closer to the edge than ever?
There is a moment when the illusion begins to crack. It usually doesn't happen during a financial crisis. Instead, it arrives quietly, often late at night. A spreadsheet open on a glowing laptop screen, numbers scrolling slowly downward. This moment belongs to a different kind of character, the observer. The observer begins asking uncomfortable questions, not about spending habits, not about personal discipline, but about the system itself. One of the first people to examine this pattern closely was Elizabeth Warren, long before she entered politics. In the early 2000s, she and her daughter studied over 2,000 families who had filed for bankruptcy. Their discovery surprised almost everyone. Households with two working parents were more likely to go bankrupt than households with only one. Working harder, earning more, yet somehow becoming more financially vulnerable. At first, the conclusion feels counterintuitive. How could two paychecks create less security? The answer hides in a subtle shift in how society calculates affordability. Imagine a housing market where most families earn only one income. Home prices naturally adjust to what that single income can support. Now imagine something changes. Suddenly, most families bring two incomes to the table. Banks notice, mortgage approvals increase, bidding wars begin, and slowly, home prices rise to match the new purchasing power. The result? The second income stops being extra. It becomes required. A house that once required one income now requires two. This phenomenon quietly spread beyond housing, education, healthcare, childcare. Every major expense began adapting to the new baseline. The middle-class lifestyle slowly recalibrated itself around dual-income households. To see how powerful this shift can be, consider a simple example. Imagine a household where one partner earns $70,000 and the other earns $50,000. The combined income becomes $120,000. That number feels large, but the observer begins breaking it apart. First, taxes. Because tax systems are progressive, the second income often falls into higher brackets. That $50,000 quickly shrinks to something closer to $32,000 or $35,000 in take-home pay. Then comes childcare. In many areas, daycare averages $15,000 per year per child. With two children, that becomes $30,000. Already, the second income is nearly gone. Then, transportation. Two jobs usually mean two commutes, fuel, maintenance, parking, vehicle depreciation. That can easily reach $5,000 to $8,000 per year. But there is another cost rarely mentioned in financial textbooks: exhaustion. Two full-time careers leave less time for cooking, cleaning, and home maintenance. Convenience quietly fills the gap. Prepared meals, delivery services, house cleaners, quick solutions for tired evenings. These exhaustion expenses can easily add another $5,000 to $10,000 per year. Add everything together: taxes, childcare, transportation, convenience spending. Suddenly, the household may discover something shocking. The entire second income might contribute only a few $1,000s to the family's financial progress, sometimes even less. In extreme cases, it becomes almost symbolic. Someone works full-time, commutes through traffic, misses family dinners, and the financial reward for all that effort may be the equivalent of a few dollars per day. Yet psychologically, the household still thinks in terms of the combined income, a $120,000 identity. Spending decisions are made based on that number. Homes are purchased based on that number. Loans are approved based on that number. And this is where the mechanism of the trap quietly locks into place, because the moment the lifestyle depends on both incomes, something essential disappears: the backup plan.
If illness strikes, if a layoff arrives, if burnout forces someone to pause, the financial structure suddenly loses half its support. And when fixed costs are designed for two incomes, losing one can feel like the ground vanishing beneath the entire household, which leads to an unsettling realization. The modern two-income household didn't just gain earning power, it may have accidentally sacrificed something even more valuable: resilience. And once that realization appears, a deeper question begins to form. What if the real goal was never two incomes, but the freedom to survive comfortably with only one? There is a peculiar moment that happens in many modern households. It rarely appears during a financial seminar. It rarely shows up in budgeting apps. Instead, it often surfaces quietly during a conversation that begins with a harmless sentence. "We should be doing better than this." The achiever says it first, not angrily, not even frustrated, just confused. After all, the math seems obvious. Two educated adults, two careers, two paychecks arriving every month. The numbers should be working, but the feeling inside the household says otherwise. And this is where the observer begins to see something deeper. The trap was never really about income. It was about how expectations expanded around that income. Imagine two families looking for a home. One household earns $70,000, another earns $130,000. In theory, the second household should have dramatically more financial breathing room, but in reality, something else tends to happen. Banks approve larger mortgages, real estate agents show slightly nicer neighborhoods, friends talk about school districts with impressive reputations. The second household begins competing in an entirely different market. A house that once cost $200,000 decades ago now costs $400,000 or more. Not because the house itself became twice as valuable, but because buyers now arrive with twice the income. The competition quietly inflates the price. This phenomenon spreads slowly through every layer of modern life. Education follows the same pattern. Good public schools are often tied to expensive neighborhoods, funded by property taxes. Parents, naturally, want the best environment for their children. So families begin bidding higher and higher just to secure access to a specific zip code. No tuition is officially charged, but the mortgage quietly becomes the tuition. And once that mortgage is signed, the household makes an invisible agreement with the future. Both incomes must continue flowing, not temporarily, not occasionally, but permanently. The reliable one begins to feel this pressure first. It shows up in subtle thoughts. What if one of us gets laid off? What if someone gets sick? What if we just get tired? Because modern life does not always move in straight lines. Careers stall, parents grow older and require help, children sometimes need more attention than expected. Life introduces events that do not appear in financial planning spreadsheets, but a household that depends on two incomes for survival has already used its emergency lever. There is no hidden reserve waiting in the background. The system operates at full capacity. It works perfectly, right up until the moment it doesn't. Economists sometimes describe this condition using mechanical metaphors: a machine running without lubrication, an engine pushed to maximum output. Everything functions normally until one small component fails. Then the entire structure collapses faster than anyone expects. This helps explain a statistic that quietly unsettles many economists. Nearly 40% of adults cannot cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing money, not because they are careless, not because they lack income, but because their expenses have quietly expanded to match every dollar they earn, which creates a strange paradox of modern prosperity. People feel wealthier than previous generations, yet financially more fragile at the same time. The achiever eventually stares at the numbers again. Income is high, effort is enormous, but security still feels distant. And in that quiet moment of reflection, a new question appears. If earning more hasn't created freedom, what exactly has all that extra income been buying? Every trap has one defining characteristic. It works best when the person inside does not realize it exists. But the moment the mechanism becomes visible, something powerful happens. Perspective changes. The observer begins to think differently about money, not in terms of income, but in terms of flexibility. Because flexibility is the real form of wealth that many modern households unknowingly traded away. Decades ago, a single-income family possessed something subtle but powerful: options. If the main earner lost a job, the other adult could enter the workforce. If a child needed attention, someone could stay home. If life shifted direction, the household could adapt. There was room for adjustment, room for error, room to breathe. But many modern households unknowingly built their lives around the opposite structure. Two incomes are not treated as a bonus, they are treated as a permanent requirement. And once that happens, something important disappears: choice. This is where the quiet strategy begins to emerge. Not a dramatic lifestyle overhaul, not extreme frugality, but a simple shift in design. Think of it as building a one-income foundation beneath a two-income household. In this approach, the essential expenses of life, housing, transportation, insurance, food, are structured so they can be covered by one income alone. Not comfortably luxurious, but stable, survivable. The second income then plays a different role. Instead of supporting the lifestyle, it begins supporting the future: emergency savings, debt elimination, investments. Gradually, each dollar saved begins purchasing something invisible: optionality. Optionality means the ability to step back from work if necessary, the ability to care for a parent, the ability to recover from illness without financial collapse, the ability to make career decisions based on purpose instead of survival. At first, this approach can feel uncomfortable. Friends might upgrade their homes, while another household quietly chooses a smaller one. Colleagues lease new cars, while another family keeps the old one running. From the outside, the lifestyle may appear less impressive, but something different begins happening behind the scenes. Savings grow, investments compound. Over 5 to 10 years, the second income, once absorbed entirely by expenses, starts creating independent financial momentum. Money begins working quietly in the background, and eventually, the household arrives at the situation they originally expected dual incomes to provide. Not just income, but security. This is the strange twist hidden inside the modern financial system. The households that truly thrive are not always the ones earning the most. They are the ones that protected their margin. They refused to let every dollar of income become an obligation. They kept their backup plan alive. Because in the end, wealth is not measured by how much money flows through a household. It is measured by how many choices that household can afford to make. And once that realization settles in, one final question quietly remains. If two incomes were never the real goal, perhaps the real goal was always something simpler: a life where money supports freedom instead of quietly controlling it. At some point, the numbers stop being the most important part of the story. What begins to matter more is the quiet shift in how a household thinks about its future. The achiever and the reliable one sit at the same kitchen table where so many monthly budgets once felt heavy, but the conversation has changed. Not because their income suddenly doubled, not because the economy became easier, but because a different question entered the room. Not how much can we afford, but instead, what kind of life actually protects our freedom? This small change in perspective alters everything. For years, modern culture has celebrated income as the ultimate scoreboard: higher salaries, bigger houses, more impressive neighborhoods. It all appears to signal success. Yet, when examined closely, income alone behaves like a mirage in the desert. It promises security, but disappears the moment expenses rise to meet it. True financial stability comes from something far less glamorous: margin. Margin is the quiet space between what a household earns and what it must spend to survive. It is the breathing room that allows mistakes, surprises, and unexpected turns in life. Without margin, even high earners feel trapped. With margin, even modest earners often feel secure. The observer begins to notice something curious about people who appear financially calm. They do not always drive the newest cars. They do not always live in the most impressive homes, but their lives contain something many others lack: flexibility. If work becomes unbearable, they can step back. If family needs attention, they can respond. If an opportunity appears, they can take it. Their financial life does not operate like a fragile tower balanced on two salaries. It behaves more like a structure with deep foundations. The paradox of modern prosperity slowly reveals itself. The goal was never to build a life that required constant maximum effort just to remain stable. The goal was to build a life that could withstand uncertainty, because uncertainty is the only guarantee that every household eventually encounters. Jobs change, health changes, family responsibilities appear unexpectedly. The difference between crisis and resilience often comes down to one simple design decision: whether a household allowed every dollar of income to become an obligation, or whether some of that income was quietly transformed into future freedom. This is why the concept of the two-income trap matters, not as a warning about work, not as criticism of ambition, but as a reminder that income alone cannot create safety. Only flexibility can do that. And flexibility begins the moment a household chooses not to spend every advantage it has. In the end, the real measure of financial success becomes surprisingly simple. Not the size of the paycheck, not the size of the house, but the quiet ability to answer one powerful question with confidence. If life suddenly changed tomorrow, would this household still have room to breathe?